wesn brings back those magical mornings with Retro Saturdays.
Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born!
Where the young at heart relive the fun. Join us every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, only on WESN, the content capital.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
WESN.
Often imitated, never duplicated. Other shows miss the point because this is the one and only, the original talking point on WESN, the Connect Capital Show. Michael Small here with you. Apologies for the late start. I was caught in a traffic blockage around the Savannah. I don't think it was necessarily for very long, but I don't know for sure. One of the inconveniences of living and using the Savannah for the daily commute. One of the issues with the use of the Savannah for national events, and this happens throughout the year, is generally speaking the fact that once you are of a certain side and you need to use the Savannah to get somewhere, and you start your path, you are locked in. There is no alternative. And it does beg the question, is there potentially a better way to do these things, a different way to do these things? Possibly not. We don't necessarily have a lot of venues that would be, one, able to provide all the logistical requirements needed, and two, be technically better at or better than in terms of not blocking rush hour morning traffic and not inconveniencing commuters, right? One of the issues I have, though, is that at times the disruption for different reasons could be as long as half an hour. Now, when I was stuck in my car on sort of half an hour, that was when I believe the Indian Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister came, and it wasn't rush hour morning traffic. But it just shows that I think the way how we do things was maybe more appropriate way back when. Not necessarily appropriate right now. Unfortunately, we have way too many cars on the road. Now, one of the things that has come up recently is water fees has gone up. Not fees for water, but plumbing fees. Now forgive me, but I don't necessarily know the breakdown of how this works. But it seems to be one-time fees increased by varying degrees with regards to inspections and approvals for plumbing systems, water, wastewater, infrastructure, etc., etc. Now, the former minister is seeking to say that the public was not informed. Some of these fees, not all, but some of these fees went up by 700%. And the lowest increase is by 100%. Now, the flip side is the current minister is saying, well, hold on, these fees are since the 80s, they're old, and they need to be increased, and that there is no secrecy surrounding the move. Now, here's the thing. I can't say for sure if there was no secrecy surrounding the move. It might have been a situation where they didn't necessarily want to announce it to the world. But I can't necessarily say that this situation, just because it was not broadcasted with loud music and great fanfare, that it reaches a threshold of being a situation where we need to be upset about it. We could still be upset about the fee increase, but I'm talking about how it was handled, right? Opposition Chief Whip Marvin Gonzalez is saying the customers were not informed. But generally speaking, things like that, I feel a lot of the citizens, even if the public is informed, gazetted, public service announcements, radio advertisements, TV advertisements, newspaper advertisements, a lot of people won't necessarily always know. Then again, usually there is some buzz when things have changed, but that might be things like driver's licenses or things like that. But to some extent, people would then go to the licensing office or whatever public entity that they are getting the service from, and there might be quite a lot of people who are not necessarily aware of the nitty-gritty details, like how much or what is the process of when you pay, what does the payment mean. So, and generally you kind of depend on asking people who you might know have done it already. So, there's a notice at the office, potentially, Opposition Chief Whip Marvin Gonzalez is saying that the fees on the website are outlined, but apparently it's not what is the updated fees right now, which could be part of the problem, right? There was one situation where the fee rose from $150 to $1,200, and Marvin Gonzalez is basically saying, well, look, this is another way that they're trying to collect revenue. And to be fair to him, I don't necessarily think he's wrong. I just don't know if there's enough to accuse Minister Paderat of saying, like a thief in the night. I mean, on some level, yeah, it might have effectively been that, but is it enough for it to be an issue? I'm not sure. We have an issue in the country where attempts to disseminate information to the public at times is very ineffective. And the thing is, it's hard to prove if the lack of public knowledge is intentional or not. But I will say this, if all they did was just put a notice at the office, right? Now at least there is a notice. But if that's all they did, one could debate whether that is sufficient enough. Because I feel there is an incentive to essentially hide the fact that the fees increased. I just don't know to what degree can I say that's something that they need to be condemned for. Now, if you go to the wider picture, why might they want to not necessarily announce to the nation fees are being increased? Well, it's obvious. It's another situation where people like me, with my perspective on the nickel and diming, are basically going to say, here's another example of nickel and diming. Where are they going to find the money? Out of your pocket. It seems as though, as someone pointed out to me, so I forgot all about this, have we engaged with Venezuela with any one of these joint control gas field projects? How has those discussions been going? Because one of the potentially debilitating implications is the fact that attempts to find the money with joint projects with Venezuela, if they have failed, does that then mean that they're going to try to find more ways to extract money out of the pockets of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? And then, I am normally not someone that is as concerned about the wealth gap. Because I would always say the key to the wealth gap is not if the rich are getting richer. It's if the poor are getting poorer. You see, if the rich getting richer, but the poor getting richer too, all right, fine. Because then, on some level, that might be a sign of trickle-down economics. You know, economic activities working, and rich getting richer, poor getting richer, but there's no corresponding inflation to wipe that out, right? But if it's the case of the richer are getting richer, it actually doesn't even matter if the rich are getting richer. Once the poor are getting poorer, you have an issue. Because even if both sides of the line of the wealth gap situation are getting poorer, inflation does not reverse course, right? And the difference is the wealthy will be able to survive, to compensate. For someone who's wealthy to do without means maybe not taking an expensive vacation. Maybe you take a cheaper vacation. Maybe you don't have as much expensive food. Maybe you have more moderately expensive food. The quality of your life, it's going to drop, but it's going to drop from luxuries to not necessarily all the way down to basic necessities. There's a lot of room in between. Whereas for the poor, there's a lot of people who literally do not have any sort of margin of error with their monthly budgets. And that's one of the things that friends of mine who were already tight financially long before the election, that's one of the things that they're looking at, that they're pointing out. Because what happens is, whether it is some fee for whatever bureaucratic process like passports for children, whatever the raises are, every $500 here, $1,000 there, they feel it. And something like this now, basically what you're saying is it's going to be more expensive. You see, the thought is property owners are rich, so it's going to cost them. They're going to have the burden. But the reality is, what about the people who struggle to earn enough money to buy or build their own home? Who are not looking for handouts from government? Who are not looking for some cheap rent apartment that they'll never pay the rent for? But they did the right thing. They earned for themselves. They bought the land, they built a house, or they bought a house outright with their sweat and their effort. And now they find out, oh, it might cost a little bit more, depending on if they need to worry about the various things. Right? Obviously, all right, fees for swimming pools, I can't really care about that. That's a luxury item. That's not a necessity. That's a luxury item at a time when we do need to wonder, you know, how much water. Swimming pools do take up quite a bit of water. And even if, say, you fill a pool, given the heat, evaporation could take that water too sweet. Yes, rain, water can replenish it. That's if it rains. So, the other thing is, I have already spoken to something I heard about in Tobago with regards to WASA. Right? And I can't fault Marvin Gonzalez for being suspicious of this and painting it in a negative light. Because overall, I honestly see nothing good happening with WASA. There's too many issues, too many inconsistencies, and too many concerns coming out of that state entity. It's hard to say that what's going on in WASA is not, in whatever shape or form, highly political. The relationship with the union and the government is potentially, technically speaking, compromised. There is, potentially speaking, a conflict of interest there. Because the stakeholders with WASA is not just the owner, operator, which is government, or the workers, employees, which is represented by the union, but the stakeholders also include the customers. We don't have an alternative to WASA. WASA is effectively a monopoly. They can inflict upon us whatever they will. The question is, are you going to accept it, or are you going to do something about it? And by doing something about it, I don't mean something stupid like threats or violence. But at the end of the day, this is something that the population has to decide to make an issue out of it or not. The opposition, they have said their piece. The government has countered certain claims. If you follow the news enough, you would see all of it. This could very well be a situation where the fees were too old. The flip side is the increases being so high might not necessarily be reasonable. It might not. But that's really what part of the problem is. I've never run a water authority before. I don't have a way to gauge what is reasonable for the fees or not. I know that we have this problem where various entities, even private sector entities, have pricing schemes that are extremely outdated. But the flip side is, unfortunately, the government has, and I would argue the P&M administration did the same thing. When you do things that diminish the capacity of the public's tolerance, diminishes the capacity for the public to give you the benefit of the doubt. Now, this is one of those things where essentially the government is saying, trust us. And there will be sections of the population that says, no, we don't. Because you have killed that trust by your own words and deeds, especially words. Especially words. And we are just a few days from celebrating independence, just a couple days. And that's one of the interesting things, right? We are still operating with a lot of old fee structures, a lot of old procedures, a lot of old practices, a lot of old laws and regulations. And some things have been updated and not everything. And it's kind of funny that we're celebrating independence while in a lot of different things we are stuck by what we inherited from our time as a colony. We are stuck in a system of government designed for a nation larger than us with a different setup for the head of state that ensures independence as opposed to what we have pseudo-independence. We have, when someone is appointed, we keep our fingers crossed and we hope they act independently. Not necessarily do we have a system that guarantees some degree of independence. And yet here we are celebrating independence. And what that makes me question is, have we matured enough as a nation? Yesterday, Ashraf and I was talking about it. In many ways, it seems as though we have not. In many ways, it seems as though we have not. There's a new bomb threat, apparently, the Scarborough Magistrates Court reported yesterday. It disrupted the proceedings. Now, something like this, it could be somebody else targeting a specific proceeding yesterday morning. One of the issues is, because they reported no arrests were made, the minister said arrests, I believe he said arrests are imminent. Yes, almost a week ago. Now, I'm not entirely sure what imminent means, but it's really not a good look. Maybe I missed it. Maybe they did arrest somebody. Maybe I missed it. But we're under a state of emergency, and you don't need to gather evidence to detain somebody. You could detain somebody off of the basis of a private rant on a phone call, and the police don't even need to know about the incident that's leading them to detain somebody in the first place. That is how weak the burden of proof for PDOs are. And yet they can't get anybody for these bomb threats. 64 years. And we did not necessarily develop policing skills. We did not necessarily develop our society in a way to truly meet the challenges and demands of independence. And now, because you can't get anyone arrested, detained for these bomb threats, you potentially have another Yahoo thinking, you know, it'd be a good idea, I'll call any magistrate's court and threaten them with a bomb. And this could continue to happen. And that will result in one of two things, which I spoken with Ashraf about a couple weeks ago. It might have been last week, not this week. What it will lead to is, this will continue, and either we will continue to respond with great effort and expenditure of resources and inconvenience, and we will do so dutifully, responsibly every time, or at some point, which is more likely to happen just because of sheer human nature, we will start to become complacent the more hoaxes are allowed to be sent in. The more threats that turn out to be hoaxes, and then human nature, it's another bomb threat hoax, it's another bomb threat hoax. And that could come with the possibility of, it's another bomb threat hoax, and we don't take it seriously, and we don't fully check, and we just kind of do the bare minimum because we don't want to disrupt the country with another hoax again. And then it really is a bomb, and people really do die. You can't allow these kinds of empty threats to just pass without any sort of consequence. The fact that the SOE is working, but outside of one old lady, the niece who was trying to calm her down and dissuade her from continuing the type of talk she was talking, and the niece's husband, who was not on the phone, I am not entirely sure if they have detained anybody with regards to any of the other threats against the government or public spaces since the very beginning. So tell me, how is the SOE working? Right, yes. I believe yesterday there was the report, no arrest yet. 64 years, they say. 64 years, and we did not develop a sustainable economy in those 64 years. We did not develop ourselves enough that we are secure in what we're doing. 64 years, why is it that too many of the citizens of the country are dependent on essentially government work programs and handouts, right? Because here's the thing, if the economy was good and people could get jobs and earn for themselves, maybe we wouldn't need so many grants for school books. Also, one could argue the school book situation is exploitative, but that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other conversation. Because heaven forbid, used books not be a thing. That's taking money out of the pockets of the authors who rarely. But because, you know, everybody needs to get ahead and exploit everybody else, so we have an unhealthy economy. Not one based off of merit, because you can't tell me that every dish and change is a meritorious one. But, notwithstanding, THA wants to end a 10-day work program that will affect 1,000 workers, which, in theory, if there's about 60,000 Tobagonians, 1/60th of the population is not necessarily a small number. Now, they were looking to potentially take some of these individuals and give them permanent jobs in vacancies within the Division of Division of Public Infrastructure that apparently need to be filled. So the idea is to take them out of this program, which is not necessarily a long-term solution, and give them actual jobs. That's fine. The problem is Chief Sec is complaining about the slow pace of the administrative process. That was yesterday. He also complained today about the slow pace or the slow start to school repairs, which potentially coincides with school repairs around the country, and it makes me wonder what's going on. Why does it always take so long? That said, apparently their budget is already separate to the national budget, and money was allocated since May. 64 years of independence, and we're still making mistakes like not moving fast enough or starting late on situations. We're not talking about someone putting together some minor clerical report. We're talking about work that can affect the lives of citizens in the country. And what's going on in THA, it's not some special situation that you won't see in various parts of central government, of the public entities in Trinidad. "64 years of independence. Now there's concerns that cutting those workers could fuel crime. The thing is, it seems kind of simplistic. People lose their jobs, they'll turn to crime. The problem is, that is a plausible scenario because our anti-crime measures are not as effective as some would like to think. Because there isn't enough to dissuade people from committing crimes. there is enough to dissuade people from committing murders to a point. But particularly, this is the thing, the hardened criminals who understand the criminal justice system, understand the rules of the game that they play, so to speak, they will know when to back off, at times at least, right? And when they're free to do whatever they want. But what is the government trying to sell us on the murder rates? Even though it's not the majority of murders, they're trying to sell us, I believe, if my memory is correct, that, you know, about 80-something of the murders are domestic in nature, or things like that, things that will be difficult to prevent and detect and control and things like that. And it's not gangsters or hardened criminals, but it is individuals kind of just ending up in a situation, doing the wrong thing, domestic violence situations, murder-suicide situations, stuff like that. Fine. It is those types of criminals, the ones who feel as though life has backed them into a corner, circumstances have backed them into a corner, and they don't necessarily think that crime, murder, robbery, rape, whatever, is a good idea. They should be doing it their whole life. But for whatever reason, they're in a situation where they're going to do it now. They might regret the decision later on, but something pushed them over the edge, and other people are going to suffer because of it. And one of those things can be, I lost my job, I don't have money, I need to survive, I'm going to do something stupid. Right? This is from one of the people speaking, one worker speaking in Tobago. Quote, what do they want me to do? Climb coconut and balata tree every day of my life? Sit down in front of a shop and sell drugs? There's more criminals in Tobago now. October go come and my phone might ring. Them want people to go and do is who know who and who willing to help you. Yeah, that's one of the issues that I have heard in Tobago. That there is the same song and dance of friends and family. Because this is the thing, corruption doesn't start off outright as, you know, malicious, evil, where it starts off as me and mine, and we will more or less discard everybody else. No, it starts off as times are hard, so-and-so need help, so need help. And you think, oh, one time is not a big deal. We have a job to fill. Who do you know? I need somebody for this. Things like that. But when you start to scale that thought process up, and you start to do that for more and more people, it turns into a, well, who knows who have an in? Because if you don't have an in, yeah, one time you need to fill a job, you ask around, who know who? I need somebody to do this. That's fine. But if you start to do that at scale, it will leave out anybody that doesn't have any kind of link. And then on top of that now, it's one thing, all right, you have a family member, he needs a job, you try to help him out. It's another thing, again, if you scale it up, all of a sudden, it's friends and family being hired only. All of them family have government work. People who are not related to them don't have government work. So it doesn't start off outright malicious, but it can end either malicious or at least looking very much malicious. 64 years. Why does it feel as though we are less prepared for independence now than we were then? And some could argue, oh, Eric Williams was so bad. Oh, the PNM was so bad. Yeah, that's fine. Why does it still feel as though we are less prepared for independence now than it was then? I don't think we need a state emergency to keep the murder rate down back then. Just saying. I don't think we lost the village back then. I don't think we had such widespread allegations of corruption back then and inefficiency in the public service. When we haven't heard from him for a while. Hopefully everything's all right. When you hear the professor speak about the public sector, when it was formed and what it did, when it was created, how it operated at the beginning, and you compare and contrast that to now, it's almost like if he's talking about a whole different country. And you want to tell him, you know, that's kind of naive and idealistic, but the fact of the matter is he is pointing to when he was working, things were different. And to be fair to him, why should we accept, oh, well, that's just how the way it is now in 2026. Things just bad. Why? What made it bad? Did a volcano erupt and then just make the public sector inefficient? Did a flood just happen and just turn the public sector into a set of people that just didn't want to work? What was it? Was it that they had a TV show last night that upset the entire country and that's why people don't want to work? I mean, look, they've been talking about noiseless fireworks for I don't know how long. Why is it a big deal that they're going to use silent fireworks now? And I'm not saying it shouldn't be a big deal. It is a big deal. I'm saying, why did it take so long to implement this in the first place? I don't understand. This should have been something that is old news because it should have been done I don't know how much longer ago, because it's noise pollution every independence and whatever, republic, whatever day for fireworks, and how it frightens animals and frightens the zoo animals and frightens babies and affects the elderly, etc., etc. This shouldn't have been up for debate. I don't know what it is that we've been talking about silent fireworks for at least a few years now, and oh yeah, we're going to put it in, finally. Because it's such innovative thinking. What? We went from noisy fireworks to silent fireworks? Who could have thought of that before 2026? I mean, is it that somehow we magically spoke about silent fireworks before, but just we didn't realize we could actually implement them with state-sponsored celebrations? I don't understand. Is it that maybe it was a practical thing? Maybe they didn't have it to the size, the scale, the scope that was needed? I don't know. I don't know. But one of the things with the announcement was very funny. Sorry, let me not say that. The report is very funny. The report said, this year's Independence Day fireworks display will be completely silent, but officials promise the cultural celebrations leading up to it will be loud, vibrant, and patriotic. And there's a part of me that thinks, I understand that, you know, the celebrations can't be quiet. You can't be in a celebratory mood and be silent. I get that, but still, the juxtaposition of, we're going to reduce noise here, but don't worry, there'll still be noise over here. And I think that's one of the things. 64 years, we are a nation known for its culture with regards to partying and celebrations. Carnival, our carnival is considered the greatest street party in the world as far as I remember, right? Not necessarily the greatest carnival in the world, although there are a lot of aspects to carnival that originated from here that is we kind of take for granted, really. But 64 years, and now we're trying to figure out things like noise pollution. 64 years, now we're trying to figure out things like how to responsibly celebrate publicly. It's not as though they haven't been loud music in maxis and taxis since I was a child. It's not as though you haven't had big fetes and loud fireworks since long before I was born. But we're now asking the questions of a mature nation. What are the principles that we want to operate under? The overarching principles that will then inform us. How do we treat with this noise pollution situation? How do we treat with this Independence Day celebration situation? How do we treat with other situations? I'm not talking about a policy and legislation for noise pollution. I'm talking about guiding principles, vision and mission for the country. Yeah, we have watchwords. We don't follow them. Yeah, we have a motto. I don't think we believe in it. Yeah, we have a Pledge of Allegiance. Who said that since primary school? We have a national anthem. Do we take it seriously anymore? I don't think so. We give it lip service. We look at the Americans before their games and we see how they act and we think it's corny. And we think, oh, look how arrogant they are to be proud in their own nation. But there's something within us that wants to be proud about our nation. There is. When we see one of our athletes stand on a medal podium, or when we see one of our contestants win a beauty pageant, when we see one of our leading artistic and cultural icons put together artistic displays for the world, puts together programs on an international level for the world. We want to be proud. Maybe the young people don't care about that, but maybe the young people do care about when you have someone with a Trinbagonian background, a music star, a rapper, or a streamer. I believe Kaisenat has Trinbagonian roots, one of the biggest streamers in the world. And then when IShowSpeed came down here, mid his Caribbean tour, best food of the tour, Trinidad and Tobago, for sure. That's what he said, basically. We want to be proud. A food YouTuber that I don't believe he's visited here yet announced he plans to make videos on every country in the world, acknowledging that he has visited approximately 80-something countries already, but he is looking to get 196 really, videos on the food, to document the food of every nation. Some might be harder than others, but one of the countries he singled out to ask for people to respond to, should I go here, is Trinidad and Tobago. Because he knows of us. He just hasn't reached us yet. But he knows that would cause a reaction because, hey, we're getting famous now. We're getting famous on the internet now for certain things. We don't necessarily appreciate that. But I don't know about the rest of you. Whenever I see something that has Trinidad on it, whenever Nicki Minaj has a Trinidad flag anywhere, whenever Busta Rhymes acknowledges Trinidad and Tobago, whenever Pitbull acknowledges Marshall Montano, anything, I feel proud. That's something for me. Whenever we see any random foreigner, YouTuber, vlogger, they're in Trinidad, they're talking about Trinidad, they're experiencing Trinidad and Tobago. Sometimes they're on shippiness. Or even a local Trinbagonian putting together videos on the country and putting it out there to the world. I feel proud. We want to feel proud. The unfortunate thing is, do we have anything really to be proud of on a sustained basis? Because I do understand, I don't fully agree. I can't say that I completely disagree, but I do understand how the politics has caused some people in America to think, hey, I don't want to celebrate my country. Now, I partially understand. I don't fully understand, because you are basically saying, I don't like my country because the other side won this election. That's not a permanent thing. Your side could win tomorrow. Are you going to hate on your country tomorrow? I don't fully understand why it is that they have people who outright hate, seemingly, or say things to suggest that they hate the American flag, the American anthem. I could understand if it was more like us, if the reaction led to indifference. Because I feel that's what's happened with us. The politics probably has something to do with it as well. Because we don't view the country as Trinidad and Tobago, we view the country as PNM versus UNC. Just like how a lot of people caught up in American politics don't view America as the United States of America. They view it as Republican versus Democrat, the game show. Let's go. Who's going to win this week, John? And that's all they see. They don't see that the flag is supposed to represent everybody. They don't see that their flag is supposed to be a symbol of something greater than their petty politics. 64 years, and one thing, you could say it's a legacy from how the nation was born. That's neither here nor there for me. I will say that we have allowed ourselves in too many ways to be enslaved by the past, whether it is colonialism. And this is the thing, the enslavement by our colonial past is not due to the former colonizers, but rather it's because of our decisions now. And we are slaves to the past of, well, it's the PNM at the beginning, and they formed the country. So you have one side, they're slave to the past. Look at us, we're the party that formed the country. And you have the other side, they're slave to the past of, look at them, they're the people that started the country off on the wrong foot. Meanwhile, nobody really cares about yesterday. Yes, it affects the price of bread today, but we can't change yesterday. You can only set up change for tomorrow. And everybody wants the price of bread to change tomorrow. You can lament and regret all you want about yesterday. But troubles are here to stay today. 64 years. We're young by modern standards of nationhood. I say modern standards because on some level, 64 years is not, 64 years is still young when you consider nations back in medieval times, ancient times, antiquity. But I mean, if you look at the history of China, because they have a very long, unbroken chain of empires rising and falling, kingdoms rising and falling, they tend to survive a few generations, 2 to 3, maybe 4. It's not like they have, like, you know, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years of unbroken rule. 60 years is still kind of short. But at the same time, there was a volatility there, where a nation could rise and fall seemingly very quickly. And a generation of a ruler, people didn't live to 80 back then. You wouldn't have had a Biden. He's there so old at 80 that, you know, there's a whole host. No, like health, medical science, diseases, injuries, infections, a whole host of things would have taken you long before back then. I saw somewhere where in China, you know, a grandparent might have been 30 back then, in ancient times. I don't know how true it is, but we do know that there's, or rather, there's a reason why certain traditions have marriageable age a lot younger than what you would find in modern societies now. A lot younger. 15 seems to be like that sweet spot for a lot of different cultures where they're like, you're a man now, you're a woman now, time to marry. Not necessarily as bad as 12 or 8, but still. I don't think there's anywhere, at least in Western democracy, where you could marry at 15. But that was the way how the world was then. You had kids as young as that, bearing certain responsibilities then, maybe even younger, because Life was a lot shorter. And nations in that volatility disappeared like that. England wasn't England since humans lived on the British Isles. It was conquered multiple times. Don't necessarily see anybody talking about reparations for that. Multiple countries were wiped out, absorbed, conquered by multiple invaders. The Romans, the Saxons, the Normans. We are 64 years old. There are a lot of nations that are like us that are young as well. And there are a lot of nations who they might have been more mature before, but they have somehow devolved to where we are at. Because at the end of the day, I guess we are all victims to human nature. And human nature comes with very basic flaws. And a lot of it is allowed to pass because we don't necessarily put in the effort that would have been required back throughout history just to survive. But in modern times, we take survival for granted, and we take nationhood for granted. That's why we don't necessarily care so much about our national symbols. That's why I think we don't necessarily, when the chips are down and your back is against the wall, you don't identify yourself as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago and tell people, I don't want to be involved in your nonsense. I am not a party member because I have issues with the political party. No, you have people that resign themselves to participating in that nonsense because it seems as though for too many people it's the only way to get ahead. If you're rich, you could throw money at it to support. If you're poor, you have to join up. Just look at me. As a member of the media, I could be a lot more comfortable if I decided, assuming that they'll accept me, to pick a side. They would love to have another propaganda artist. And that's what it would be. I can't take a side in the politics. I could take the side of whoever does a good job. But to say that I'm going to be biased for one side, loyal to one side, no matter what, create all the excuses, run cover, defend, when all else fails, I can't do it. It will potentially be an easier way to make money, but I can't because I am a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago before any other political allegiance, because that is a political allegiance. My allegiance is to the flag, to the red, white, and black. Not to the flower or the sun. "64 years of independence. I don't know if we are really showing that we're independent. You could be independent and not be independent. Like a young man who doesn't know how to make his way in the world, young women tend to sometimes have a better sense, at least going up through the normal expected route of academics. But young men struggle a bit more, and that's Trinidad and Tobago. It's a young man struggling, trying to figure out what's he going to do for the rest of his life. And we don't know. We don't know. And that's not on the politicians, that's on us, as I always say. So I have another question for you to ask yourselves. Look in the mirror. What do you think about independence? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you to be independent? Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'll just briefly touch on what the opposition leader said yesterday, and then we'll open up the phone lines, close out the week. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the and we'll be right back after this.
Trinidad and Tobago, the trial of the century is back. And you are the jury. After sold-out performances in the UK and Trinidad, Focus Arts Promotions is back in TNT with the explosive, hilarious, and thought-provoking stage play by Alan Charles. Why Didn't I Get Married? It's not good for man to be alone, but what about the women? In Trinidad, Central Bank, Port of Spain, Saturday 12 September, 7 p.m. and Sunday 13 September at 6 p.m. Tickets $225. Available at A&A Pharmacy, Port of Spain, Living Legacy Arima, Maranatha in Sando. For more info, call 768-8214. And for the first time at the Shore Park Complex in Tobago, the day before the holiday, Wednesday 23rd August, 7 p.m. Tickets $200. Available at the Gentleman Barber Spa, Coconut Cafe, and Pablo's Supermarket. For more info in Tobago, call 320-2249. Why Did I Get Married? 7 women, 1 lawsuit. Man shortage in the church? Let the bacchanal begin.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
The fluid retention occurs in the lungs and they get short of breath, particularly with exertion, and is a particularly condition where when lying down they feel short of breath and have to use a lot of pillows. That's a sign that the shortness of breath might be due to heart failure.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. I'm back to talk about the wesn Content Capital. Now I want to switch gears specifically to what's going on in San Fernando. The opposition leader responded. I want to say certain things to ensure that people do not mistake my mistake yesterday for something that it's not. Because I made a mistake yesterday. The Minister for Land Security, he said there were shocking things that he saw with regards to the allegations. Now I thought it was with regards to dwelling in America that Mr. Manning purchased. That is apparently wrong. I don't believe a name was attributed. It had something to do with the allegations that Brian Manning had against the executive of San Fernando East constituency. That said, my point still stands. One, doesn't seem as though there was a lot of evidence there, because if what the minister saw was shocking, there should be an investigation. You don't want to tell us that there's an investigation. At least I don't believe he said that anything substantial, that arrests are imminent. But you want to tell us that you saw shocking things. That is potentially going to create some kind of prejudice against people in the situation, right? You didn't name any names. Maybe that was for good reason. But I do find it inconsistent that you could editorialize certain things when you're ready, and frame certain things when you're ready, and not frame other things when the public asks you to do it. More importantly, I did say whoever leaked whatever it was should suffer some consequences for it, particularly if they're members of the PNM, in part because it doesn't seem, at least for now, that there was any significant evidence that revealed actual corruption. That's how it plays out when you listen to what Roger Alexander said. Right? It seems more like it's an allegation with just enough real information. A house of this price was purchased. But nothing was said about the source of the funds, right? Not even just the, well, it is believed, I don't think it was said, it was believed that this house was purchased by legal funds. If I am wrong on that, forgive me. But assuming that is true, that it's a very narrow amount of information on the situation, it seems more like an irresponsible accusation. Now, that doesn't mean that corruption isn't there. Corruption could be there. But if you mess up the accusation and you don't get the evidence beforehand, and the thing is essentially settled whether in the court of public opinion before the proper evidence could be brought to bear, you could undermine any attempt to properly prosecute corruption. Just saying. So I didn't necessarily like that you just leak a thing, it might be an incomplete thing, it sounds like an incomplete thing. And then you have the Minister of Homeland Security basically doing what I have already, in past instances, denounced. Similar to when Dr. Keith Rowley said, oh, well, you know, Guy Griffith, he did so many bad things. Can't tell you about it now, but it was bad. Minister Roger Alexander, it's amazing. I was amazed. Amazed by what exactly? What exactly? Spell out the accusation for us, please. Let us be amazed too by this great revelation. So, whether it was Brian Manning or Alexis or whoever leaked it, whoever's responsible for it, whatever's going on, it's like, hold on, was this done in good faith? It's hard to tell. Was it a good idea to do it? That's also hard to say. I'm leaning on no right now. That said, the opposition leader spoke yesterday at a press conference. She had a lot of interesting points to make. I don't know why I can't find the article all of a sudden. One of the main things is that, no, there is no plan to expel Santa Fe North East MP Brian Manning. Now, here's the thing. I don't think there's a way to expel him as an MP. So I am assuming she's basically speaking with regards to party membership, right? Because like we saw in Tobago, the dynamics of political allegiances could change. You know, Duke was stuck as the lone member of the PDP when everybody left and formed the TPP, right? So she's saying, how did we reach here? And ultimately, the PNM, this is not what the PNM does, air out their dirty laundry in public. And the thing is, this is not speaking against transparency. Because I have said before, there are things that should not be public. There are. You could be transparent on what happened, but you don't necessarily air out the entire dirty laundry process, what was said behind closed doors, who accused who of what, who cussed out who and all of that. You don't put that out there. You put the facts out there when pertinent for transparency. But you don't literally air out everything and you talk about it on a radio show and you do this and you do that and you delete WhatsApp messages and all of that crap. And then that comes out to the public and all of that nonsense. And who look at who funny and who had bad feelings and who bad mind and no. She acknowledged the fact that yes, it's 2026, there's social media, right? There are new channels of communication. How you engage with the public is different, but she points to the fact that there's an official process. One, that the chairman, she didn't say this, I'm going to add, basically told the participants, hey, this is how we're going to resolve it. They didn't necessarily listen. Now it reached this point, right? she's saying, look, we have a process. We're not a fly-by-night party. We're not going to operate like any ad hoc or dolly house party. This is part of the reason why the PNM succeeds where third parties fail. This is part of the reason why. When you have a foundational process to fall back on, that people could look to and say, listen, when all else fails, individuals could have biases, individuals could have agendas, but the process that we have held to for decades is what it is. It is probably the most unbiased thing that we could have right now, to just settle with the process. If the process is corrupted, that's a different story. But the process that we have all, subscribed to, that we have all basically the process of an entity that we have joined willingly, this should be the unbiased guiding light to deal with this situation for us, to guide us in this situation, right? Now, she has said that she has an issue with people making accusations and providing no evidence, because she has said, right, they have looked into it, they did not find any evidence of corruption. Now, here's where I understand why she says what she said. I don't necessarily think it was the best way to say it. I don't think I disagree with her. Right? Now, she goes from the premise that, look, the fact is an allegation and an accusation is not guilt. It doesn't prove guilt. Fine, I'm with you right there. Then she goes on to say, if you have information that whatever she purchased was acquired illegally, carry it to the authorities. If Mr. Alexander himself has something shocking, he is the minister, he can go and talk to the Commissioner of Police. They can do their investigation, but don't put the onus on me at all. I am not the Attorney General. I am not the Minister of Homeland Security. I am not the Minister of Defense. I am not the Commissioner of Police. They know the powers they have to investigate. You have your powers to investigate. If you see something shocking, go and do your investigation. Don't put any onus on me. And I understand what she's trying to say. I just think she's not framing it the best way. Because the problem is, it can sound like, and it probably will to some people, that she's saying it's not my job to deal with corruption. That sounds kind of better, but think of it from this point of view. If you see an instance where there is potentially corruption, how does it look now as a public official, political party, opposition leader, is to some extent a public official, says, well, it's not my job to look into it. What? There's corruption over there? I didn't see it. Your job, you see about it. Because essentially it is happening under her leadership. She's not just an independent third party that has no reason to be involved, and it would be inappropriate for her to be involved. This is happening potentially within her party. Now, the key thing is, I believe that this is not a situation, at least on the surface, where she has been unable or unwilling to deal with the matter. I think potentially she could have maybe used stronger language to talk about the fact that, look, we have a process. And if I were to circumvent the process myself for something that potentially may have benefited me, people will have an issue with that. Why do you want me to circumvent the process now? This is the thing, right? When people are ready, there's always this desire to shortcut the process. Instead of going through the proper ordinary channels, we want a special investigative body, right? Now, if a politician decided to cut through the red tape, half of the time they call it corruption, whether the intention was malicious or not. The key thing is, according to Deputy Political Leader, I think it's Budu, they looked into it and did not find anything to corroborate Mr. Manning's claims. So they did look into the matter. It's not as though they just, what, corruption? We don't see corruption. What are you talking about? They did look into the matter, or at least they claim to do so. So you have to include that to then say, the opposition leader, I believe, she's not saying, well, if there's corruption, you need to look into it. But I think what she is saying is, we did not find anything. You say you found something. It's not, and I believe she said this somewhere, but I'm not entirely, I can't find it right now. Right? It's not her job to do your job. It's not her job to prove Brian Manning's claims. They looked into it. They didn't necessarily find anything substantial, right? They did say, well, the evidence that he pointed to was in the but they didn't find anything in the news. And when that came out in the article early in the week, I did say, exactly, it's not their job to prove his claims. Now, Minister Alexander said he found something shocking. It's not the opposition's job to prove that he found something shocking. So especially if it's a situation where, listen, whoever leaked him, whatever it is they sent to Minister Alexander, why don't they then say, we also leaked it to the opposition leader, and she sat on it? Why don't they leak it to the public? That's how whistleblowers work, right? If there is some revelations and evidence, and you are an anonymous whistleblower, why don't you leak it to the public? Is it that the information is thin, like with regards to the Star Sabga recording? The evidence, the information, the intelligence was pretty thin. I hope for the sake of the government's liability, they have more intelligence than just that. The implication is they do not, but we don't know for sure, right? The way how the opposition leader said it, I don't necessarily like it, because it makes it can be then interpreted that she is saying we do not have a responsibility to look into corruption, when the reality is she does have a responsibility, the party does have a responsibility. You can argue, at least based on what they said, we don't have, video proof of watching party officials investigate and audio proof that they discussed this and went over the evidence and whatever, right? They didn't necessarily give us our detailed information on the process, but they said they looked into it and they didn't find anything. Now, you might not want to give them benefit of that's up to you. But with that framework, she's saying, you have something, I don't have it. You have something, and you're the Minister of Homeland Security, and you have technically reporting to you the Commissioner of Police. Don't put the onus on me. I don't have, apparently, the information. And again, if she does, if it was given to her, then whoever leaked it could say, I am the anonymous source, contacted the media and said they gave the same information to the opposition leader. Right? So, Mr. Manning has some claims. Now, here's the other thing. Where the opposition leader is correct is, the PNM has only so much powers to investigate criminal matters. They can investigate things on their end, internally as a party. Right? But on some level, the PNM as a party, I don't think has the power to go into a constituency executive or a local government body. They could maybe go through the officials of the party within that body, but especially since the executive resigned, I don't know if they legally could access those records. So part of it is the official powers to investigate. It might reach the stage now where a PNM investigation could be considered tampering with, depending on how far they go with it. Obviously, if they just do things like interview their own people, right? But if they start to access, because a constituency office, it's not party office we're talking about. It's not the PNM party group office. We're talking about San Fernando East constituency office, right? So in that case now, one could argue this might have gone beyond the scope of what the PNM should be allowed to look into as a political party, right? And this is where now the government should take lead, because the government has the police, that's the official investigative service of the country to investigate crimes. Because part of it is, and again, I wish that the opposition framed this better. Could you, the PNM, you want the PNM to investigate the PNM for corruption. Think about that now. Now let's just say the opposition leader said, we will investigate and get to the bottom of this. You know what the government would say? The first thing government public relations people would say is, how they investigating? They're not in charge. They're not the police. They investigated themselves. That don't look right. The opposition leader can investigate the manner as it pertains to any breaches of any of the guiding principles or regulations or policies of the party within her authority as political leader of the PNM. But at some point, the criminal conduct has to be investigated by agents of the state in order to pursue criminal charges. And a party investigation could interfere with that. So she is right to say the onus is on the police first, and to a lesser degree the government, right? Let's not have any Freudian slips about who tells the police what to do now. But the way how, maybe it was how it was reported. I wish she did more to ensure that people will not interpret it as though she's saying, I don't have to investigate. They have to investigate. I am not going to investigate. I have no responsibility to investigate. No. Technically speaking, we all have a responsibility. If we see something wrong, we have a responsibility to look into it and to report what we find to the authorities. Except in this case, apparently, according to the minister himself, which is why, again, you need to know what not to say. According to the minister himself, he has information. So he doesn't need the PNM to report on anything to him. So any talk about you need the opposition leader to deal with this, this has gone way beyond that. If this was an internal party matter, then it's all Penelope Beckles. But Brian Manning has gone on to say allegations of corruptions out into the public. And whoever, maybe he or whoever, I didn't read who did it, gave the Minister of Homeland Security information. Now, technically, yes, the onus is on the government, and more importantly, especially, the police service. And the onus is no longer on Penelope Beckles because that ship sailed. And maybe that was what Brian Manning wanted to accomplish. He didn't want it to be a party matter because it is, in his mind, corruption. And he would rather, because if it is corruption, at some point, it can't just be handled by the party alone. It can't. Not if we want to have proper justice over the situation. So if the party is dragging its feet, as far as he's concerned, he's going to go straight to the authorities, right? And get a proper resolution to the situation, because he is alleging criminal conduct, not just misconduct by party regulations. That's very different things. Now, if that is his sole motivation, and he's doing things to affect that, I wouldn't necessarily want to see him kicked out of the party. But I can see where, because we tolerate and encourage party loyalty above nation. So let's not be hypocrites now. Let's not be hypocrites now, because we as a public tolerate it to the point where we accept and agree party politics trumps national interests. We tolerate it enough. We give our assent, whether proactively or silently. But I could see where, because of that, Brian Manning might be in hot water. He might. Part of it kind of depends on the politics surrounding the situation, right? Now, Mrs. Manning, Brian Manning's mom, is looking to go up for the upcoming constituency executive election. Part of the problem with internal party politics is elections might not necessarily be a democratic process. It might be, in the sense of it's a consensus of what the party membership wants, or what have you, or what the constituency wants, or what have you. Or it might just be, well, this is a PNM stronghold, and we'll do whatever the PNM wants, and the PNM wants X, and anybody that's not X is not really going to get through. So we'll see how it plays out. I think the PNM needs to do a better job of being transparent on the issue, one way or the other, describing what Brian Manning did, why he did it, and why it's justifiable however they want to treat with him. Whether it is to basically, after this time as MP of San Fernando East, he's gone, or he's going to continue to be a member in good standing, whatever it is, because they have to explain to their membership and to the nation, how was this resolved? And so that it doesn't hang over his head and potentially the opposition leader's head and the current executive's head. How it was handled, if the public, if the membership and the wider public disagrees with it. Let's not forget now, the public disagreed with the selection of Prime Minister after Dr. Heath Rowley retired. Let's not forget about that now. So they need to do a better job, because it is a situation where the infighting really makes the party look unstable. The opposition leader, I think, again, she could have come out a bit stronger saying, we are following the process because we are guided by principles. We are guided by our philosophies. We are guided by the structure created by our predecessors. And it is a good structure. And you, to some extent, you are putting a lot of faith in the system, but you're also strengthening it. And by doing so, you see, I think sometimes leaders, I'm not saying this about Penelope Beckles, but other leaders who operate differently, maybe to her, might not want to put so much emphasis on the system and the structure, because that puts power in the system and the structure. And then you might be the leader, but now it is beholden upon you to have to follow that. You yourself are no longer able to be bigger than that, right? But at the same time, if you do that, then you interject some more degrees of objectivity into the process. You to some degree could say, listen, there's a process, not just that there's a process, but there's a strong process by which even I have to follow. And then if you want to criticize me, you are misguided, because even I must follow the process. She could have come out with stronger language to that effect. But politicians, maybe all of them try too hard to be flexible, and they don't necessarily know when to commit to take a stand. So I actually do appreciate what she had to say, but that doesn't mean that the situation is resolved. It does not. More importantly, one way or the other, this is an indicator of instability, because either you had someone with a senior position in the party and the constituency who is guilty of corruption, or you have an MP going completely off the rails if the individual is innocent. Either way, it's not a good look. It's not a good look, because then now, let's just say the PNM wins the next election. Odds are it will be because the UNC is voted out. And then when the PNM wants to go and say, hey, you're all corrupt their way, we have to go and now fix this. And we're going to come after them for corruption. Everyone will say, yeah, what about what happened in San Fernando East? Because either you had corruption under your nose, or you couldn't find the corruption right in front of your face. And that's why this has to be resolved in order to help ensure you have legitimacy in the future on any corruption matter. Otherwise, the political leadership of the PNM will not have any legitimacy dealing with corruption. And I don't know how effective you're going to be at that point. So it is not just about not making mistakes, but proving how you resolve those mistakes. Human beings will make mistakes. Human beings will make mistakes. How do you not make those mistakes? Sorry, how do you fix those mistakes when you make them? That's really what separates people of principle and people who are ethically unreliable. It's not if you make mistakes, it's when you eventually do, how do you deal with it? Are you upright and forthright, or do you want to hide in the shadows? Because you might still not necessarily be ill-intentioned. But once you start doing that, once you think, it's better we just keep this hush-hush, you start yourself on a path that you might not be able to get back from. Corruption doesn't start all the way in the deep end. You start in shallow waters, and you slowly progress. The problem is, no one really knows how to swim in waters like that. No one is that proficient in swimming in corruption. At some point, you reach the deep end. You think you're fine, you're confident, you want to go further and further, because the rewards, the deeper you go, the greater the rewards. But at some point, you're only 6 foot tall, and the water is 9 feet deep, and you can't swim. Some point you'll drown. So, the PNM still has a lot of work to do, as I said, on this situation. Overall, I'm still not off of that fact. But I'm not going to necessarily say, well, the opposition leader is doing the wrong thing, and I have no confidence in her because of this. No, as was pointed out to me, the problem is you want a bombastic person as opposition leader and a docile person as prime minister, a respectable statesman or stateswoman as prime minister. The problem is the opposition leader is the prime minister in waiting. You can't have it both ways. And Dr. Rowley has proven, and Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar has proven, them stripes don't just change overnight. She changed it for the election campaign, but that was it. Dr. Rowley initially stayed docile and placid, and then once he had to talk, because his ministers were putting their foot in their mouth far too often, it went off the rails. So, if you want somebody combative, don't be surprised if they win the election and become prime minister, they are overly combative. And don't complain about it when they do. Just saying. That's the unfortunate catch-22. All right, for whatever it's worth, for just a few minutes, because I do believe we should have Annie Johnson. We open up the phone lines. You can call and have your say. Call in quick. Call in quick. But I guess, I don't know, this might be one of those days, we in the dog days of summer. And everybody might have had everything that they had to say. I guess now we have to wait and see what the government makes of this. I really hope it's not a situation where there's an implied allegation. I hate that. I hate that with a passion. Balancing House right now, there's implied allegations. Well, to be fair, everyone has suspicions of political parties. The trick is, You really want to tell me that we can suspect the PNM and not the UNC of similar? This is one of those interesting things where we really stuck on the court of public opinion and the optics and the emotional roller coaster, and we're not willing to follow the proper processes. We have David in the line. Caller, good morning, you're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Hi, Sean. Morning to you and the crew there. Morning to San Fernando. Wonderful program as usual, and happy Independence. So everybody there. Sean, I stated before that I have to be very careful with commenting on this PNM issue. I think you're doing sufficient research, and I admire the information and the opinion that you are laying on the table. However, to me and to many people, something's not right, and somewhere the truth is not coming out. If further information or investigation is to be done, I think it should be fairly done. And people really deserve to know the right thing. The constituents of San Fernando East, I think in the near future, will have a new executive. And I wish them all the best as they go forward to really rebuild that constituency that I would say the Mannings plus meaningful patrons have done over the years, you know. So, but if you would allow me though, a lot of other issues in this country have been blinded by this PNM issue. And the $1,000 book grant for students, I think that is appalling, and I think that the minister or people in the ministry have actually dropped the ball, and in this last hour to want to issue the grant, which is not a bad thing, but people don't know whether they're coming or they're going. They don't know whether they will be allotted the grant, because there's no surety that when you apply that you will get the grant. So that in itself, you know, I think that the minister probably through his inexperience, I don't want to be able to, I don't want to cast blames on anybody, but something went wrong, and I don't know. I want to make one suggestion. I make one suggestion that I think, Sean, and I will hang up so other people can continue calling. This current government is actually, they have no money and is trying to play out for this.
Might have lost the caller. Oh no, connectivity issues. I don't know to what extent it has to do with the issues TSTT's been having with the copper and fiber lines this last week. Caller? All right, we lost the call. I think that was just latency audio speaking. He was speaking about we have no money. I assume he was going to talk about the budget. And I'm not sure if he was speaking about the mid-year budget review that went on. I'll say this. I agree with you about the grant. The problem is not everybody could afford to spend the money up front and then hope to collect the money, get the money back from the grant. In part because they just don't have it. Right? Some people, they might have it, but they really can't risk spending it and then they don't get the money back. But others just don't have it. They cannot make that decision without the grant. Now, I'll say this, and I said this earlier on the show. My issue with the grant is there's a part of me that thinks I don't like the fact that we need this grant, that there are people that need this grant. I don't like the fact that we can't give people the capacity to fish. We just give them a fish every day. We have a money line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Sir Michael Small, good morning to you and Talking Point Nation.
Morning. Quick.
Now, I want to wish everybody a safe, productive, and quiet Independence weekend here. I want us to sit down and reflect. Reflect on all what has happened since 2000 to now. How life has changed. How money running and the life that we want to live versus the life that we're supposed to live. Because plenty of the citizens in this country, when you look at it, right, they have this idea in their head of how it should be. And they're not looking at how it actually is. And some of us will get caught up. And it's time, because if we look back, 2017, Dr. Rowley acquired a boat, I think like Galleon's Passage. 2021, he got 2 more. You look at the central block in the hospital, you look at some of the minor works, community center, library, swimming pool. And when you look at some of these things today, and they shut them right down, and they leave them to go into rotten, that could never be right. We in this country had to make up our mind as to what it is we want. And we had to take it in incremental steps, small at a time. Good program as usual, son. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I will say this, I was always an advocate for 3 ferries. We kind of ended up with 4 3/4 because the Gallant's Passage, 3 3/4 because the Gallant's Passage is not as big as the Spirit, APT James, or Boca Reef. But I was always an advocate for that in order to try to smoothen out the maintenance curve, in order to not have dips in inconvenient timings on ferry service, because the ferry is important. To me, that's the cost-effective way, or that's the one that should get the subsidies to ensure people there is a reasonable priced way to travel between the 2 islands. There's a lot there. I don't really have much more time to comment on that. I do have to go. I agree with Mr. Dabity. Something is not right. That's why I said you need to have the criminal investigation. The party also needs to have a transparent resolution on their end. Their situation is not necessarily corruption per se. Their situation is, why did their party process break down in the issue between the MP and the constituency executive? That needs to be resolved so that everybody can move forward however they decide to do so, with regards to Brian Manning, with regards to the members of the executive of the constituency who resigned, etc., etc. So, but we've reached a point now where the criminal investigation, that's on the authorities, that's not on the opposition leader. But the party needs to get a transparent resolution. It is a necessity. And it is not a necessity, means they have to do it, otherwise they're done. Everything falls apart and the party is disbanded. It is a necessity if they want to continue to operate with a certain level of respectability and integrity and trust of the public. Now, happy Independence. I would just ask that on Independence Day, reflect on the nation, on what your country means to you, and ask yourself, with that said, what do you do for your country? Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to this country and to each other. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. 10 questions with Andy Johnson coming up next at 10 a.m. Andy Johnson, always nice with it. Always a nice interview. Enjoy that. Meanwhile, we'll see each other next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't